Harper Owens had been sitting alone in the airport lounge for almost an hour, her suitcase tucked neatly beside her, a half-finished coffee cooling on the small table in front of her. When she noticed the man across from her, though at the time, she had no idea he'd change her life. He looked like the kind of guy who didn't wait around for flights. Perfectly tailored navy blazer, clean white shirt, loafers that probably cost more than her rent. He was absorbed in his laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard with such focus it made her wonder what kind of life he was heading back to. Probably meetings in glass towers, assistants trailing behind him with tablets. Definitely not the kind of guy who would fall in love with a woman who just got laid off, scraped her last savings for a standby ticket, and was heading home to a job that didn't exist anymore. She checked the time again, then glanced out the floor to ceiling windows. Gray skies, delayed flight. Of course. Flight to Chicago's delayed again, a voice said suddenly, deep and smooth. Harper looked up, surprised. The man with the blazer had turned slightly toward her, one brow raised. Up close, he was even more striking. Strong jaw, a faint 5 o'clock shadow, the kind of green eyes you didn't forget. I figured, Harper said, giving a small laugh. This day's really outdoing itself, he smiled, but it wasn't cocky, just warm. Let me guess, standby, she blinked. Wow. That obvious? Only because I've been there. Years ago, you keep checking the gate like you're hoping someone miraculously won't show up. She laughed again, a little embarrassed. Busted. He leaned back in the leather chair, stretching his legs out. Business or personal? Neither, she said, then paused. Actually, maybe both. I just got laid off. I was interviewing in New York all week. No luck. So now I'm flying back to Chicago with nothing but a suitcase and a resume no one wants. There was a beat of silence. She regretted saying all that. Why did she always overshare? But the man didn't look uncomfortable or amused. He just nodded. I'm sorry, he said. That sucks. Yeah, she said, then smiled wryly. I didn't mean to trauma dump on a stranger, I swear, he grinned. I've heard worse in this lounge, she tilted her head. You fly a lot, his shoulders lifted casually. More than I probably should, Harper studied him. Let me guess, finance, not quite, consulting, he hesitated for the briefest second. Sort of. Before she could press further, the gate attendant made an announcement. Another delay. She groaned. He glanced at her coffee. That's been sitting for a while. Let me get you a fresh one, she blinked. Oh no, you don't have to, I want to, he said simply, standing. How do you take it? Black, no sugar. He nodded and walked off. She watched him go, wondering what kind of man offers to buy coffee for a stranger in an airport lounge. He didn't have to. He didn't even know her name. He returned a few minutes later with 2 coffees and a slice of banana bread. They were out of muffins, he said, handing her the drink. But this looked decent, she grinned. You didn't have to, thank you. I'm Kellan, he said, finally offering a hand. Harper? Kellan and Harper, he said thoughtfully. Sounds like a bad country duo, she laughed, and it felt good. She hadn't laughed like that in weeks. They ended up talking for the next hour, about everything and nothing. He asked about her design work, how she ended up in New York, what she wanted to do next. She dodged asking too many questions about his job because he always gave vague answers, but he was attentive, funny, and sharp. She didn't feel like a failure around him. She felt interesting. Seen. I should probably let you get back to your emails, she finally said. Noticing his laptop still open, he shrugged. They can wait, she smiled softly. You're not like most people in suits. He looked at her for a moment, something flickering in his eyes. I'm not like most people in a lot of ways. Before she could respond, the final announcement came. The flight was boarding. She stood, grabbing her bag. Thanks again, she said, hesitating. For the coffee, the banana bread, the distraction. Kellan stood too. Harper, she paused. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a pen and scribbling something on the back of his boarding pass. I don't usually do this in airports, he said. Actually, I never do this, but in case you want another coffee in Chicago, she stared at the card, his name, Kellan St. James, a number. She smiled. Okay. They boarded, sat rows apart. She glanced back once, catching him watching her, and quickly looked away. By the time they landed at O'Hare, she lost him in the crowd. Days passed. Then a week. She didn't call. She didn't know why. Maybe she didn't believe someone like him would actually want to see someone like her again. Maybe she was scared he wouldn't remember her. But Harper never forgot that hour in the lounge, or the man who made her laugh when she was at her lowest. She just didn't know that Kellan St. James, the man she met by complete chance, the man who handed her banana bread and a smile, was the CEO of St. James Enterprises, a multi-billion-dollar tech and investment firm based in downtown Chicago. And she definitely didn't know that he'd been searching for her ever since. Harper's shoes pinched against her heels as she stepped into the downtown Chicago co-working space, an oversized tote slung over her shoulder, and a stack of freshly printed portfolios tucked beneath her arm. The receptionist glanced up with a polished smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You're here for the design pitch with Winthrop Media?" Harper nodded, breath caught halfway in her throat. "Yes, Harper Owens. Elevators to your left, 18th floor." "Suite B." As the elevator doors slid shut, she caught her reflection in the mirrored panel. Subtle makeup, hair twisted into a low knot, blazer pressed but a little too vintage to pass for high fashion. She exhaled. This was her 5th pitch that month, and her savings were thinning faster than her patience. At least, this one wasn't in a strip mall conference room. The elevator opened to a minimalistic lobby with floor-to-ceiling windows and a receptionist who barely glanced up from her tablet. Harper followed the signage to Suite B, entered, and found herself in a sleek waiting area where modern art hung against concrete walls and the scent of eucalyptus drifted from somewhere she couldn't place. "Harper Owens?" a woman in a cream blouse asked, holding a tablet. "Yes, right this way." "You're presenting in Conference 5. Harper followed her through a maze of glass partitions and quiet conversations. When the assistant opened a door, Harper stepped inside and froze. Kellan sat at the head of the table. This time, he wasn't in a blazer. A slim-cut charcoal suit, no tie, shirt crisp and open at the collar. His gaze was focused on a document in front of him, but the moment she entered, he looked up. His eyes widened just slightly. "Harper," the assistant blinked. "You two know each other?" Kellan stood. "Yes, we met briefly." "At O'Hare." The woman looked between them, puzzled. "Should I give you a moment?" "No," Harper said quickly, forcing a smile. "Let's get started." Kellan didn't say anything, just gestured for her to take the seat across from him. His expression was unreadable now, all traces of the man in the lounge sealed behind a professional mask. Harper opened her portfolio and began presenting. She walked him through her concept for Winthrop's rebrand: clean lines, bold typography, a color palette rooted in timeless sophistication. Her voice stayed steady even as her mind spun. What were the odds? Out of all the clients she'd pitched, this one had to be him. When she finished, Kellan closed the folder slowly, fingertips resting against the edge. "Who else have you shown this to?" "No one. It's a custom pitch." "I don't recycle design work." He studied her for a moment. "And you've been freelancing how long?" "Since last October. Before that, I was in-house. But the company downsized. I've been building my own client base ever since." He nodded once, then leaned back in his chair. "The work is strong." She didn't answer. She couldn't read him. "I'll need to discuss with the Winthrop team," he continued, "but I'll be in touch by the end of the week." Harper gave a tight nod and gathered her things. As she walked toward the door, he said her name again quietly. She turned. "I wasn't expecting to see you here." "Neither was I," she said, "but I guess life's weird like that." He paused. "You didn't call," she blinked. "You noticed?" "I waited." Harper hesitated. "I thought maybe it was just a nice moment in an airport lounge. Not something meant to follow us into the real world." His expression didn't change. "What makes you think this isn't the real world?" She gave a small shrug. "Because you're sitting behind a table in a skyscraper while I'm trying to convince you I'm worth hiring." "You don't need to convince me." Her breath caught. "Then what is this?" "This," he said slowly, "is business, but that," he nodded toward the door, "that was personal. And I meant it." She looked at him for a long second, then nodded once and left without another word. Out in the elevator, her heart thundered. She didn't know what unnerved her more, that he still remembered everything, or that she did too. The next morning, a courier arrived at her apartment. Inside the envelope was a formal letter on heavy cream stationery with a Winthrop Media letterhead, offering her the full rebranding contract, 6 months minimum, with an optional extension. Attached was a check for the initial deposit, already signed, no note, no explanation. Except for the tiniest handwritten line in the bottom right corner, "You didn't need to call. I found you anyway." Harper stared at it for a long moment before folding the letter back into the envelope and placing it gently on the table. 2 days later, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. "Hello, it's Kellan." She didn't respond immediately. "I know this is complicated," he said, "and I'd never use a contract as leverage. You earned that job, but I'd still like to see you, not as a client." Her voice was quiet. "You think it's that simple?" "No," he said, "but I think it's worth trying." She sat down slowly. "Where? I'll send a car." "Of course you will." He laughed softly. "You haven't changed. You don't know me well enough to say that. Then let me learn." She didn't answer right away. "But in the end," she said yes. Because whatever this was, whatever it could become, it had already begun that day in the lounge when he offered her banana bread and a smile instead of pity. And now it was her turn to find out who Kellan St. really was. The car that arrived wasn't just a car, it was a black Bentley with windows tinted to privacy glass opacity. Its leather seats buttery soft, and the driver in a dark suit who called her Miss Owens without asking. Harper tried not to gawk, but as the city blurred past her window, she found herself gripping her purse tighter than necessary. She'd Googled Kellan St. the night she accepted the invitation. The search results had been staggering. Founder of a tech conglomerate valued in the billions, board member of 3 global nonprofits, keynote speaker at international conferences. Articles described him as private, elusive, brilliant. Not a single photo showed him smiling like he'd done with her in the airport lounge. The car pulled into a private parking garage beneath an upscale building in River North. The elevator, keycard operated, took her directly to the penthouse. When the doors opened, she stepped out into a space that looked like something from a design magazine. Slate floors, towering windows, and a skyline view so sharp it seemed cut from glass. A low fire flickered beneath a steel mantel, and somewhere further in, a piano played quietly through hidden speakers. Kellan was standing near the window, sleeves rolled to his elbows, a crystal tumbler in his hand. He turned as she stepped in, and for a moment neither of them said anything. "You came," he said, his voice lower than she remembered. "I wasn't sure I would," Harper admitted, setting her purse on the entry table. "But then I figured. You already tracked me down once." He gave a quiet laugh and offered her a drink, which she declined. "So this is your place?" she asked, walking toward the window, letting her eyes sweep across the staggering view of Lake Michigan. "One of them," he said, and when she turned, he added quickly, "Not trying to impress you. Just being honest, you're doing both." He walked toward her, stopping a few feet away. "I didn't plan any of this. When we met, I wasn't thinking about business or connections or anything strategic. I was just tired. And then you sat down across from me, and I forgot how exhausted I was. You didn't tell me who you were. I didn't want to. I liked being just a guy in an airport for once." She crossed her arms, not as a defense, but just to ground herself. "And now I want you to know exactly who I am," he said. "No hiding." She studied him. "Then tell me something no one else knows." He was quiet for a moment, then walked to a cabinet and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside was a faded photograph of a woman with short curls and a mischievous half-smile. "My mother," he said softly. "She passed when I was 9. My father buried himself in work after that. I think that's when I learned to do the same." Harper stepped closer, glancing at the photo. "She's beautiful. She used to sing to me when I couldn't sleep. I haven't told anyone that in years." She looked up at him. "Why me?" Because you looked at me like I was just Kellan, not a name, not a company, not a number on a list. She exhaled slowly and turned toward the window again. I don't know how to be part of your world. Then let me meet you in yours. She turned sharply. You say that, but do you even know what my world is? My apartment's above a bakery that turns on their industrial mixer at 4 a.m. I can't afford health insurance right now. I don't own a single thing I didn't buy marked down. He stepped closer. I don't care what you own, he said. I care that you ask questions no one else does, that you listen like the answer matters, that you're not afraid to challenge me, even now. She didn't move away, but her voice was quiet. You barely know me. I know enough to want more. The silence between them thickened. She could hear the soft hum of the city below, the gentle clink of ice melting in his glass. You always move this fast, she asked. With most things, yes, he said, but not with people. Not like this, she held his gaze. I don't want to be someone you collect, another novelty, his expression sharpened. You think that's what this is? I don't know what this is. I was fine being a story you told once at a party, the girl from the airport lounge. But now you've pulled me into your orbit and I don't know how to breathe here. He stepped back, giving her space. Then let's slow down, no pressure, no expectations, she nodded, eyes still fixed on the skyline. Okay, would you stay for dinner? He asked. I had something prepared. She looked at him warily. You cook? No, I hired someone who does. She laughed in spite of herself. Dinner was served on the balcony, under a canopy of hanging lights and a soft breeze that carried the scent of rosemary and lemon. The chef, a quiet woman with a French accent, presented each course efficiently before vanishing into the background. They talked about books, about cities they wanted to visit, about the moment they realized their childhoods were over. Kellan listened with a focus that felt rare and electrifying. When the plates were cleared and the chef gone, Harper stood and walked to the railing, her hands resting against the cool metal. You know, she said, not turning around, I'm still waiting for the moment this all feels fake. It's not, he said from behind her. I want to believe you, then do. She turned to face him. I'll be honest, she said. I have no idea what I'm doing. Then we'll figure it out together. He reached for her hand and she let him take it, not because she was sure, but because something in her heart whispered that maybe, just maybe, the man who found her in an airport lounge was worth the risk. Harper's heels echoed softly across the marble floor of the St. James Foundation gala, the hem of her midnight blue gown brushing against her ankles. The dress wasn't hers. Kellan had it delivered with a handwritten note that simply said, You belong here. Let them see that. She hadn't planned on attending. Galas weren't her world. But when he showed up at her door 3 days earlier, no driver, no Bentley, just a casual black jacket and a quiet invitation, she didn't say no. Now, walking into a room glittering with chandeliers and filled with people who spoke in quiet, practiced tones, she felt like she was stepping onto a stage she hadn't rehearsed for. She caught sight of Kellan across the room before he saw her. He was speaking to a senator. She recognized him from the news, but even in that crowd of wealth and status, Kellan stood out. He spotted her a heartbeat later. He didn't smile. He moved through the crowd with calm purpose and stopped only a breath away. I was starting to think you'd changed your mind, he said. I almost did, Harper replied, her fingers tightening slightly around her clutch. But then I figured if I could survive pitching to you in a glass office and walking into your penthouse without fainting, I could handle one gala. He looked at her in a way that made the orchestra fade. You're not just handling it. You're owning it. Flattery doesn't work on me, she said, but her voice softened as she added, that doesn't mean I don't want to hear it. Noted. The rest of the evening blurred into a series of introductions. Kellan kept her by his side not possessively, but as if he had no intention of shielding her from his world. He introduced her to executives, artists, and even the mayor. But what struck her most wasn't the people or the setting, it was how he looked at her when no one else was watching. As if he saw something no one else did, between speeches and toasts, she pulled him aside near the balcony. Why did you really want me here tonight? She asked. He leaned against the railing. Because I knew it would terrify you. And I also knew you'd do it anyway. That's not a reason. It is, he said. But if you want another because you've become the person I want next to me, in rooms like this, in rooms far from this. I don't know how to be someone people expect to see next to you. Then don't be. Be who you are, that's what I want. The wind caught a loose strand of her hair and she looked out at the skyline glittering beyond the terrace. I've spent so long trying to prove I belong somewhere, she said. To clients, to firms, to myself. And now I'm standing here and the weirdest part is, I think I might actually believe it. He stepped closer. You should, you were never meant to fade into the background. She turned to him. This isn't just about me though, you've got your own storm chasing you. The board, the press, the expectations. What happens when I don't fit the narrative? I rewrite the narrative. You make it sound so simple. It's not. But I've built companies from nothing. I can build a life that makes sense for us. She studied him. So this is real. I haven't dated anyone seriously in years, he said. Not because I couldn't, but because no one made me want to slow down long enough to stop pretending I was fine alone. Her throat tightened. What if we fall apart? Then we fall. But at least we'll know it was real. And maybe, he added, we don't fall at all. Maybe we just keep building. A waiter passed with champagne. Kellan took 2 glasses and handed her one. To risks, he said quietly, to choosing something that scares you. She clinked her glass to his. To possibly the most unexpected thing that's ever happened to me. 3 weeks later, Harper stood beside him again this time, not at a gala, but at the grand opening of the new wing of the St. James Foundation's Design and Innovation Center. Her work had been selected as the visual identity for the entire project: branding, signage, everything. And when the press asked who the lead designer was, Kellan didn't hesitate. He pulled her into the spotlight. When one of the journalists asked how they met, Harper answered before Kellan could. We sat next to each other in an airport lounge, she said. And I had no idea he'd go on to append every expectation I had about who people really are, Kellan added. She changed every assumption I had about love. Later that night, after the crowd had thinned and the lights dimmed, Kellan took her hand and led her outside to the rooftop garden he'd had built just for her. A quiet space above the chaos, filled with hanging lights and jasmine vines twisting up steel beams. I wanted to give you something permanent, he said. Something that's just yours. Harper blinked. You built a rooftop garden for me. I built it for us. But you'll always have the key. She wrapped her arms around him, her voice low. I never thought I'd find this. I never thought someone like you could actually be real. He leaned his forehead against hers. I'm real, and I'm yours if you'll have me. She nodded, her voice catching. I already do. And with the city glowing around them, the man she met by accident, the one who never stopped looking after she disappeared, kissed her like every moment had been leading to this. Neither of them knew what would come next, but they knew they'd face it together. Because once upon a time, she sat alone in an airport lounge, and now she was no longer alone. The morning sun filtered through gauzy curtains, casting a soft golden glow over Harper's bare shoulder as she sat curled up in Kellan's oversized leather chair, her laptop balanced on her knees. She was still wearing his white button-down, the sleeves rolled to her elbows, her hair twisted into a loose braid that had half unraveled. The penthouse was quiet except for the occasional sound of a coffee cup being set down and the low hum of the city below. Kellan emerged from the bedroom, towel slung over his shoulder, damp hair tousled from the shower. He paused when he saw her, taking in the way she chewed on the corner of her lip while reviewing something on the screen. You've officially hijacked my office, he said, walking barefoot across the floor. I needed a change of scenery, she replied without looking up. Also, your Wi-Fi is 6 times faster than mine. He leaned down and kissed the top of her head. Sounds like extortion. Call it strategic relocation. He sat on the edge of the desk, watching her fingers fly across the keyboard. What are you working on? She finally glanced up. I got asked to submit a guest editorial for Design Current. They want me to write about the evolution of identity and branding. You going to do it? She nodded, then hesitated. It feels big, like if I get this right, it could open the next door. Kellan reached out and gently turned her chin toward him. You don't need doors opened. You kick them down. You say that like you weren't the one who gave me the first key. I didn't give you anything, I just saw what was already there. She let herself lean into his hand for a moment before pulling back with a sigh. There's one more thing, his brows lifted. Oh, I got an offer from a development firm in London. A 1-year creative director contract. He was quiet for a beat. When did that happen? 3 days ago. I haven't responded yet, he exhaled slowly. Do you want to go? I don't know, she said. It's tempting. But so is this. Don't stay for me, he said. If London is your next step, take it. I'll get on a plane. She tilted her head. You just fly back and forth for a year. I once flew to Tokyo for a 2-hour meeting. I'd fly to London for you without hesitation. Her lips parted, but no words came. I never expected this, he continued. You, us. But now that I have you, I'm not letting geography be the reason we don't work. I don't know many people who would say that, she whispered. I'm not many people. She closed the laptop, stood, and slipped her arms around his waist. I haven't decided yet, but I wanted you to know before I made any choice. Thank you, he said. I'd miss you. You wouldn't have to, he said. We'd make it work. Later that week, they flew to his family's estate in upstate New York for a weekend to attend his father's 75th birthday. Harper had dreaded it for days, expecting stiff introductions and strained small talk. But what she found instead was a surprisingly warm gathering of extended family, old friends, and a sprawling garden ceremony under strings of twinkling lights. Kellan's father, Harper St. James was a tall, silver-haired man with a voice like gravel and a handshake that could crush bone, but when he met Harper, his eyes softened. So this is the woman who made my son stop sleeping in his office. Harper blinked. I didn't know that was a widespread issue. Everett chuckled. It was, for a decade. Over the course of the evening, Harper found herself pulled into conversations with Kellan's cousins, his childhood nanny, and even an 82-year-old neighbor who insisted she looked like a young Lauren Bacall. And when Everett stood to give his toast, his final words lingered with her. Success means very little if you don't have someone to share it with. I spent too many years chasing things I couldn't take with me, but seeing my son find someone who grounds him. That's the kind of legacy that matters. Kellan took her hand under the table and didn't let go the rest of the night. Back in Chicago, Harper made her decision. She turned down the London contract, not because she was afraid to go, but because, for the first time, she didn't feel like she had to chase validation across an ocean. She had everything she needed to build something right where she was. 2 months later, Harper's design agency officially launched inside a sunlit loft in the West Loop. She named it Lounge & Co. An unapologetic nod to the place where everything began. Her first client was a luxury skincare brand, her second a nonprofit focused on women in tech. By the 3rd month, she had a waiting list. Kellan never missed an opening. He showed up in pressed shirts or hoodies, depending on the day, and always brought coffee. One morning, while she sat reviewing proofs at her desk, he walked in holding a flat white and an envelope. Delivery, he said casually. She reached for the coffee. What's in the envelope? He shrugged. Open it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a drawing, a floor plan. She looked up. Is this? A house, he said. I bought the land last week, north of the city, close enough to the lake that you can hear it at night. I want to build it with you together. She stared at him. You're serious? I want roots, Harper. Real ones. Not just a penthouse and a travel schedule. I want late dinners and arguments about paint colors. I want mornings where we trip over each other getting ready because the bathroom's too small. I want a life with you. She reached across the desk and pulled him down into a kiss, slow and certain. I want that too. 6 months later, under the canopy of the garden he built for her, lit by lanterns and surrounded by every person who mattered, Harper Owens married Kellan St. James. She wore a simple silk gown. He wore a tailored suit with no tie and the same watch he wore the day they met. As they exchanged vows, the wind carried the scent of jasmine between them, just like it had that night on the rooftop. Afterward, they danced barefoot under the stars. And when the last guests had gone, when the laughter had faded into the night and the candles had burned low, Harper leaned her head against Kellan's chest and whispered. "Still think it was just a moment in an airport lounge?" He kissed her forehead, arms wrapped around her. "No," he said. "It was the beginning of everything." They built the house. They filled it with books and music and mismatched mugs. Some mornings were quiet, others chaotic, but every day began and ended with love. They never stopped choosing each other, not once, not ever.